I'll always remember growing up, one of my favorite parts of going to malls and food courts was getting one of those awesome soft pretzels with that cheese sauce. Well, today I'm going to show you making one of these Annie-style soft pretzels is easier than you think. So no need to get twisted out of shape. Let's go ahead and get started here and make a very basic bread dough. Starting with 2 cups of flour, I'm just using all-purpose here, along with 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 packet of instant yeast, 1 tablespoon of an oil of your choice. That's optional, it just makes the dough a little bit easier to work with. And 1 teaspoon of salt. And to bring all of that together, we have 2/3 of a cup of warm water. That should be about 110 degrees or so. You want it hot, but not scalding hot. You should be able to stick your finger in the water without having any problems. And while we get that dough worked together, you know the best part about having one of these stand mixers? You don't really need it. But after a while, you do get a little hooked dough. Anyway, this is what we're looking for. The dough should be soft, but it shouldn't be sticking to your hands. And we'll set this aside in a warm place to rise for us for about 30 minutes or so. But before we actually form our pretzels, we need to get our water bath ready. This is 9 cups of water and half a cup of baking soda. In theory, you could skip this part, but in fact, don't. This does several important things. The water itself is going to gelatinize the outside of the pretzel, giving them that great crust. That shock of heat is going to get them to start puffing up, and the alkalinity from the baking soda is what gives you that great brown color and signature taste. And now that we have that coming up to a simmer, let's get our dough out here. And I'm going to give this just a quick knead, just to knock down any big air bubbles and help that gluten finish developing. Which is really important with chewy style pretzels like these. Because of the way we're going to form them, if we don't have enough gluten, the dough will wind up tearing instead of stretching, and no one likes torn dough. And as a rule of thumb, I like to cut this into 8 even pieces. You could make them bigger or smaller if you want, but I feel like 8 is about perfect. And to keep our sizes consistent, I like the divide and conquer technique, where instead of starting on one end and just trying to estimate and cut off 8 pieces, you cut 1 piece in half and then you cut the half in half again, and that just helps get nice, even pieces for us. Now that we have our much needed dough pieces, we're just going to cover most of those with a damp cloth, and we can go ahead and start forming our pretzels. Basically, we just want to form this into a rope that's about 24 inches. You don't want too much flour on the board because it's actually useful if the dough can stick to the board just a little bit for rolling out. And there's no particular magic here. We just keep rolling, and we can also do a little bit of stretching and pulling and whatever you want to do to get this into a nice long string for us. If you find your dough is tearing instead of stretching, then you haven't developed that gluten quite enough. I'd recommend kneading vigorously for another 5 minutes and then letting the dough rest for 15 before trying again. But now that we have that rolled out to 24 inches, we can go ahead and form the classic pretzel shape. And fun fact, legend has it that the pretzel was invented by an Italian monk in the year 610 AD to reward young children for learning their prayers. He supposedly folded strips of bread dough to resemble the crossed arms of praying children. And I like to seal that in place with just a dab of water where the dough connects. I suggest forming all 8 in advance, and once we have, it's time for our baking soda bath. And we really don't want to leave them in here very long. I would say about 30 seconds is our goal. I'm going to leave this completely unedited just so you get a very clear feeling for that. If the dough you were working with was a little too dry, you could probably get away with up to a minute, but I really think 30 seconds to 45 seconds is perfect. Otherwise, they can start to get gummy and kind of fall apart, and nobody likes gummy pretzels. So let's pull these out and let them drain for just a moment before we transfer onto our parchment-lined baking sheet. And of course, we're going to top these with some coarse sea salt. You don't want to forget that, or that's just going to be a pretty twisted pretzel. Anyway, now that these have been properly salted, we can whisk them off to a preheated 425 degree oven where they need to bake for between 10 and 15 minutes or until golden brown, and your house smells like a bakery. At which point we can pull these out and let them cool for 5 minutes, which is the perfect amount of time to make this easy cheese sauce. So in a small pot, we want about 1/3 of a cup of milk and 4 of these processed cheese slices. Using those will get us a nacho cheese type sauce, which just pairs really well with soft and chewy pretzels in my opinion. We also want just a pinch of salt, and then we'll bring the temperature up here and let that cheese melt down for us. The fun part about using these cheese slices is because of all the emulsifiers that are already in them, they can act to thicken the sauce all by themselves. So we'll just let those gently melt in there, and once they have and the sauce is sufficiently thickened, I'm also going to add about an ounce of regular cheddar cheese just to balance out the flavors a bit. But once we add that cheddar, we want to pull this off the heat and just kind of swirl it until it's melted. Doing that allows the sauce to cool down just a little bit as it melts that cheese, which will also thicken it up a little more for us. But once that's nice and smooth, we can go ahead and serve that with our fresh baked chewy soft pretzels. This has always been my favorite style of pretzel, and with that cheese sauce, these are a meal all by themselves. And just a quick tip, if you were thinking about making and freezing some of these, it freezes better if you actually bake it without the rock salt. I really hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Passion for Food. If you have, give me a thumbs up below and don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell so you don't miss our future recipes. And check out one of our other great videos on the screen now. This has been Graham with A Passion for Food.